Hi, my name is Ivan Kirigan, and I wanted to dive into how I use different data sources to understand COVID. It's something I've been obsessing over for a few months, and I think actually might help some other people out if they can actually understand how the pandemic is playing out. So it starts here, our world in data, and there's a bunch of different visualizations by country that's very useful. And so just knowing where the hotspots are when you compare, when you hear it in the news, like, oh, Germany or wherever else is having a problem, or the United States, you come in here and then you can see, really importantly, a 7-day rolling average per million people. If you take off the per million people, then the population of the area dominates, and that's actually not very useful to understand how dense it is. And so for a virus specifically, risk is related to density, how many people have it per million people. And so you can compare things like United Kingdom or France, and actually you see that some of these other countries spiked and then they went down. United States might be going around the corner. I have family in Croatia, so I pay specific attention there despite only being 4 million people. So obviously you need that population weighted. And you see some other countries doing well. And you can, of course, look to wherever you want. 7-day rolling average is important because if you just look at new per day, the regimen of testing might mean that it has a spike on the weekend. So this is actually not very useful. And so you look at cumulative as well, and also not very useful because a lot of these people have recovered and are not transmissible anymore. So the 7-day rolling average is like a nice mix. And then when you want to care about the United States alone, there are other sources that you could look at the United States and break it down by state, but actually you want to go population weighted. And so where are these outbreaks? And I'll talk more about for each one. And I look at this other source for covidtracking.com for specifically California. So if you see here, California is going through a big spike. It's actually bigger than it was before. And then there's a California state Tableau is quite good. And so here you see another version of that spike. Last few days is very high. And you break it down by county. This is organized by population and or roughly by population. And LA County is huge. It's like 10 million people. And so here you can see there's a big spike in LA. There's a bunch of reasons for that, for why that might be. Generally, cities are worse off, and also it depends on the kinds of people there, their behaviors that they do. And then I compare it down to my area. So I'm in the Bay Area, so I look at San Francisco. And then here, because you can't quite see it, because the numbers are so small, looking at the weekly change is really important. And you compare that to San Mateo. So here we have 110 and 94 compared to San Mateo, which is going to be like 80s and 70s and a smaller change there. And so that's good to see that. And San Mateo and San Francisco have about the same population. You'd also compare Santa Clara, which is often a little bit higher. It's a bigger population, or the East Bay with Alameda. And you can see a spike here in Santa Clara. California as a whole determines lockdowns based upon county performance. And so you look at metrics like the number of COVID cases per 10K. And so this will change by counties. And so San Francisco, all the colors just recently changed and got much worse because it is increasing, but they're very conservative because if you compare California to other states, it's not as strong. And so overall, this is a great way to see like how California is performing, and then what's, which schools are going to close, what's going to be open. And then you can go all the way to a county level, and this will vary substantially. So then you can look at how San Carlos compares with Redwood City, compares with Menlo Park or East Palo Alto. And all of these towns are really different. And so they have different age of people, different density, different wealth. And so San Carlos is a bunch of old white people, and East Palo Alto and parts of Redwood City are not. And so you see that broken down. They show total confirmed cases and cases per 10,000. But what I've done is they don't show it over time by town. And so I've actually taken these stats by different towns to compare it. And here you can see the number of new cases per 10K. So now this is the marginal, not the cumulative that previous one was showing. And you compare that like 1s and 2s, 4s, and then 5, 6, 7s in Redwood City. And then East Palo Alto is just crazy. It's so much higher. But I did notice some weird things in the data, how you get negative numbers in cumulative cases. So there's definitely some funky things in data. But overall, if you want to know how it's going in the country, I would recommend you break it down by region and normalize by population. And so if you take this data and then extract it, you can get the CSV there. I made this visualization myself where you just take this data and I group it by region. And so populous states like Texas, Florida, and California are things to look at on their own. But if you want to group the whole South or Midwest or Mid-Atlantic, you can get different regions. And you get a graph like this, which is the same national graph broken down by region, not by state. So So here you can see on the bottom is California, and then Texas and Florida. So those bottom three were the Sun Belt. And the problem with this is it doesn't normalize by the share, and so you don't actually know where the hot spot is. You can see overall how we're doing, but it varies dramatically by where you are. And so here we have it stacked to 100%. So no matter how many cases there are, you break it down by region. So you can see very, very clearly the Mid-Atlantic had a huge spike early on. And then towards the summer, you had the Sun Belt with California, Texas, and Florida adding up here. And now more recently, they're further down. So despite the spike in California you saw there earlier, it is not as much as it used to be as a share of the total. And here, clearly, the Midwest and the South are dominating. So more than 50% of the new cases that are out there. You could also weight it by population to see what area is under-indexed or over-indexed. And so you have, for example, here, you can see both the Mid-Atlantic and California are very high, and very low, so they're under-indexing, whereas before California was like a little bit over-indexed by population. But I mentioned the South and Midwest, but it's really the Midwest that is dominating the share. So if you normalize that share by the population share, so if this area has 30% of the people in the country, but 48% of the number of cases, something like that, then that would be this 18% over-index. And so yeah, you go all the way from international to how we're doing down to like a county level and a town level, and then to understand where it is in the country, just to better understand what is going on with COVID. I hope that helps. Thanks.